Hello, my name is Justin Bright, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program version 1.8.1 in my next small step RP-1 career mode playthrough. And here we have another of my brand new Paladin 4 rockets that is launching up with Lunar Station up on top. 3, 2, 1, ignition of the 4 F1 engines, and we have the slow and laborious liftoff. So this is the last of my old version Paladin 4, which has like the very tight cluster of F1s underneath because this is an 8-meter diameter rocket. We are going to be moving on to a 10-meter variant of this, which is going to be a bit more capable shortly, but otherwise this is kind of sort of like the what do you call it? The Saturn C4 rocket design that never actually flew. So I've talked a little bit about that, but this is launching another one of those. And so let's just continue on upward in our flight. Just time warp a little bit, move this forward. It's a nice nighttime shot because we are launching into the plane of the moon. So as I mentioned previously, this is going to be a rocket that is, or a space station that is heading out into lunar orbit. We are going to use this as hopefully a permanent way station for astronauts that are on their way down to the lunar surface. We are going to also use this to knock out some duration contracts that we have for astronauts in space, because it does not specify where those astronauts need to be in space, and so we can do two things at the same time with this mission. Oh no! Oh, that's fine. Okay, we have an ignition failure on one of the separation boosters, but thankfully that did not go very badly at all. We managed okay. So yeah, we are on our way. 2 J2 engines have ignited, and we are moving right along, building up a collection of test light data that is driving down the ignition failure rate below 0.5%. And there goes the fairing, and now you can see all the glory that is Lunette Station. Just a little thing, but we'll talk more about that once we get a little bit closer. So yeah, this is going to be a way station that we use for a lot of lunar missions now and into the future. It is something that is very simple, but it's kind of a design philosophy that we're taking forward into a lot of future missions, where we're trying to send out significant amounts of hardware that is going to be reusable. Like, there's certain things that we cannot reuse. Like, my idea of having a reusable lander is made a lot more challenging by the fact that I just don't have engines and tanks good enough for it. But also, the engines that I do have often have ignitions. So the ones that I would engines that I would want to use would be challenging to actually get to last very long, and we'd eventually have to replace them anyways. Alternatively, we could use engines that are a little bit less good, but we would also have to deal with the staging issue. Like, the fact of the matter is that all the lunar lander modules that we've used so far have had the benefit of being able to stage off have like a descent stage and then an ascent stage that takes advantage of that reduction in mass, because it's a big job landing on the moon. That's 1,800 meters per second, sometimes closer to 2,000, depend if it's me flying anyways, just because I'm not terribly good at it. But yeah, so it's a challenging thing, and that's packing on all that fuel with generic thrusters or things that just don't have infinite ignitions can make that very difficult. Whoa. Big flip from the reaching orbit, and there we are. So yeah, so the thing that I can put into orbit that is permanent and reusable is the space station itself. So the habitation module, the docking ports, the service module, tanks for all of the supplies, power supply from big solar panels, that sort of thing. So all of that we can put into orbit and have that be just fine. Okay, RCS activated, and we are now stable in our low Earth orbit. So yeah, with the ability to get this permanent architecture out to the moon, that's something that we're going to be wanting to do on our way to Mars as well. All right, so now this big heavy thing is swinging around and preparing to head on over into the orbit of the moon. What I have decided would work is a nice low orbit. I'm targeting about 150 kilometers above the surface of the moon. I'm not sure if that's actually the best place for a space station. I'm honestly not sure because I can kind of give myself pros and cons in every single direction, right? But 150 kilometer circular orbit will be relatively good in my mind to prepare landings. Like that's kind of the main facilitation that I'm planning for here, is just have long-term habitation around the moon in low orbit that can also facilitate landings from that location. That seems to be the move that I'm looking for here. It's a pretty damn neat shot as we prepare to fire up our J2 engine up here. And we are away and burning off into lunar orbit. So yeah, that's kind of my thinking. That I'm trying to facilitate landings and also long-term habitation, and because it's a dual-purpose thing, we want to be relatively low. It's not low enough to like burn directly to the surface from this orbit. There would have to be a couple extra legs on the way down to very safely descend to the surface, but that's something that is not so hard to reach as if I was out like a couple million meters above the surface. On the other hand, being higher up would be easier to reach for missions that are not trying to go to the surface. So if I wanted to have more of a gateway thing that was like to come to the moon and then leave from the moon up to other places, being higher up in orbit might make that a little bit easier to depart from the moon because it'd be a little bit, higher, a little bit higher up, a little bit further away. Better able to make inclination changes and those sorts of things. I also thought about doing like an elliptical orbit around the moon that you could get into, but I don't know what exact orbit I would want that to be in and like where I would want to put the Apolloon. So I'm not sure if that's the right idea either. So I'm going to default to this for our first long-term lunar space station. Maybe we'll have a second one once you guys tell me if there is a obvious answer that I am missing here as far as where we should post up our long-term infrastructure. But in any case, we are on our way, burning real nice, realizing that the sound has not been on for the game this whole time. So hopefully by the time, once I finish this burn, I can jump out and get that fixed. And I do apologize for the completely silent launch here. All right, so I am now going to just move with RCS our orbit line to intersect the moon so that I can dispose of our S4B upper stage right here. And that is all we need that lower stage for. So now I can decouple once we get out into the sunlight. There we go. Just kill that rotation and prepare for the departure of the space station itself. All right, gently pushing away from the orbital debris of the S4B as we as I hopefully have fixed my sound. I think that should all sound good now. But yeah, so we are on our way off to the moon. Let's take a look at what our trajectory looks like. And we're going to want to get this all fixed up as we are preparing. So we're kind of wheeling around, and this has an attached kind of a service module stage where we have a tank of UDMH and NTO, and we're using some Russian engines, which I think I've talked about a little bit before, but these are little upper stage engines with 50 ignitions and really solid specific impulse. And they're very light, and yeah, I like them quite a bit. So I've made a couple upper stage type things using a cluster of these. So fingers crossed that they work really well. I don't know if it's a bug or something, but they don't seem to have a test light configuration. So that they kind of act like generic thrusters in that they don't have a failure chance, which I'm pretty into as far as that's concerned. So I'm just using the RCS thrusters now to fix our eventual trajectory so that we do not impact the moon. And yeah, it's going to be a very low orbit, so there's not necessarily going to be a whole lot of communication directly from the Earth to the station, but we do have communication satellites in orbit that this can bounce to. So taking a look, and we've gone from the bottom up here, we are now, you can see our avionics. We have a nice deep space avionics that we can use to manage that. This is still using Tech Level 5. We have a built-in Tech Level 5 UHF antenna, and we also have... I can't turn that off now, can I? Nope, it's too late for that. Probably should have removed that, but that's fine, because we have a Tech Level 5 UHF Omni antenna here, and we also have a radial parabolic dish antenna that is going to communicate back using S-band. So yeah, that's our communications settled. We have... the solar panels up here, big folding solar panels that we are now extending because we are in orbit and on our way. So we can point ourselves down towards the sun, which is going to get us good coverage. So yeah, that's that. We have the big service module full of all kinds of the things that we're going to need for nitrogen, for EVA, and also for pressurization, lithium hydroxide, food, water, oxygen, and electricity. Little structural piece here that connects up to the habitation module. So this is the business end of it, where we have basically just the big habitation can, which is going to provide a lot more space than crews are used to in just their Apollo capsules. But that connects up to a long crew tube that has 3 docking ports on it. So I've got one expansion port. So this is just the androgynous Apollo docking system that we are going to use if we want to expand the station at any point. We may or may not. And then we've got 2 Apollo drogue docking ports, which is going to allow actual Apollo command modules, unmodified, completely regular and as is, to dock with this thing and have up to 2 of them at a time. And I did in fact measure that this will fit. Like the Apollo module will just barely squeak in here and not touch anything. So that is Lunette Station. It's really relatively simple, but this is like 34 tons worth of hardware that we're throwing out into orbit of the moon that I can now just leave there. Now all I have to do is resupply it with all of these goods, and this should work out for a good long time. Same thing with UDMH and NTO if we want to change its orbit. It's going to maintain these thrusters on the back here and not detach them, because why not? I may want to move this to another orbit at some point in the future, and having the ability to do so is lovely. With 50 ignitions, we are going to be able to use this for a good long time. So yeah, that is that. In my changing of orientation, I have changed our trajectory a bit, so let's just bring that on back so that we can go into our very low orbit around the moon. So yeah, maybe that's a terrible place to put this, but that is where we are going to put this one. Actually, hold on a second. That's right, there is a reason for me to change where we are going. Let's put all this stuff down. So this needs to have an aposeline of less than 1,000 kilometers, so we are all settled on that. And then lunar orbit with 2 requires a paraloon above 700 and an apoloon below 225. Okay, so that is perfect. So we just need to be below this 225 level to accomplish that mission of the crewed orbit. So that is meant for just Apollo, but we are going to be doing that at the same time because it's fine. This one just takes 30 days, so there's no issue with that. And yeah, so that is that, I think. Those are all the mission objectives that we are trying to accomplish with this one. I could even go as high as about 200 kilometers, which I like just because it's a nice round, very round number. So that is our plan with that. We are on our way with Lunette Station. All right, Lunette Station on approach to the moon. Our Paraloon has remained in roughly the same spot, so I'm just tweaking this a bit to get down to exactly 200 kilometers just for funsies. And we're just going to circularize at that point, and that's going to use most of our delta V, but not all of it. So we will still have plenty to orient and point and do the things that we need to do. So let's go ahead and execute that maneuver as we come on down. So yeah, obviously there's no real space station around the moon that we have put, but it is something that we have planned as part of the Artemis program, which is, as I've mentioned a bunch of times, something that I'm incredibly fascinated by. I'm not going to get into a big discussion about the merits of the SLS, the Space Launch System. That is beyond something that I plan on arguing about. But the ideas of Artemis are really, really interesting, because I really like the idea of using the moon as a launch pad towards Mars. And obviously that's what I'm trying to do myself. So you see, even though we are on the far side of the moon now, we do not have any direct contact, but we are bouncing our control from... Oh, wait, maybe we do have direct control. Where the heck is Earth? There it is. Okay, so that's not a problem. But anyways, it's something that I plan on doing as well, is having this ignition of our 4 KTDUs. So yeah, we have... I don't like what that says at all. Is that... Why does that say it's red? Something wrong with the delta V on this thing? Alright, well, fingers crossed that everything works properly, but in any case, I have plans that are similar to the Artemis program, in that I would like very much to do some planning around the moon before we launch a large set of infrastructure on the way out to Mars. So fingers crossed that we are going to be able to get all of that done, but that's something that I am very much looking forward to doing. So the plan is to do just a little bit more work around the moon, because we are like getting ready to go completely broke. So I would very much like to be able to do some more of the contracts that we have around the moon, because we have a lot of work to do there while we are waiting for all of our interplanetary flybys and orbits and all of that stuff. Like, we have a lot of money that is like ready and waiting and coming to us at some point in the near future. However, it's going to be a while, and we are kind of in danger of like straight up running out of cash in the meantime. So I've been required to kind of continuously accept new contracts to cover that. So that just means that our mission list is getting longer and longer and longer, which is going to be a little bit hard to manage. But so far, it's actually been fine. I've had no real complaints about being able to juggle all of these things. But okay, good. So Better Burn Time was very much incorrect about me not having the Delta V for this, and MechJeb, as always, is the one that knows what's going on. So there we go. I am now going to point us back in the direction of where the sun is going to be. And 2 more things that I want to check out really quick. First, I need to rename the whole vessel, actually, because it is for some reason registered as a ship and not a station, and it definitely is a station, so there we go with that. We are pointed now in the correct direction, so we are going to time warp around, and there's 2 things that I wanted to look at. So first, I want to see what happens when the Earth goes over the horizon, and we have... Actually, I'm just noticing that we've circularized, but not really. So I need to adjust my trajectory just a skosh here. All right, so I want to minimize my number of burns that I do here, so I'm just going to burn radial in between my apoloon and paraloon, and that is going to get us a 200 by 194 kilometer orbit, which is fine. Like, I'm just super not worried about that. But one thing that I wanted to check is, once the Earth has set on the across the surface or the horizon of the moon, I'm just checking our connection here. So it looks like we are connected through the Moonfarer 1, weirdly enough. Let's see, what else can we get connected with? Moonfarer 1, Lunette 2-3, connecting us back to Earth at a very good rate, actually. We are getting 430 bits per second back to Earth from this point, and going through our relay satellite. So obviously not as good as it could be, but pretty damn good, all things considered. So let's go ahead and execute this node. And this agile little space station is whipping around. We're down to... and then we get a big, beautiful sunrise, because we are going to fix that orientation as well before we call this good. All right, preparing for our final burn before we call this space station settled. We have ignition. We have vapor in the feed lines. What the heck? Give that one more shot, maybe? Okay, I'm going to abort node execution. I don't know what the heck that was about. Did not appreciate it, really. I get this all settled and then execute. There we go. Okay, so now we are burning this down, and you can see that we are trading Apaloon for Paraloon, and that got us to a 198 by 194, and that is going to do just fine. Okay, so that is that for this. And we are now just going to settle this down into an orientation where the solar panels, the big solar panels, can soak up the sun. Let's take a look at everything. So even with the avionics on, this thing has tons of electric charge. It has absolutely no problem covering that. So it should, once we have people on board, be able to handle that load just fine. So I'm going to... well, I can leave the avionics on because it's never actually a problem. It shuts them down when I have the vessel unloaded. But there we go. That is Lunette Station, and that is put into orbit. So that is that part of the contract complete. Now we have to bring at least 2 crew to the station, and then we need to keep them on board for 30 days. And so that is going to match up with several other contracts that we have, and hopefully that is going to get us a whole bunch of money because we are just about broke. But mission success for this one. All right, so taking a look at where we are at, we are 13 days from a maneuver of our Hermes-1 that is on the way to Mercury. It's going to have to bounce around, and I'm just trying really hard to figure out how to get a really good indication of what our final trajectory is going to be. But what that one's going to be is that's going to be just lowering its orbit slightly so that it is going to get more frequent, or it's going to get better, how to put this? I'm matching some orbital parameters of the Hermes-1 with Venus so that it's going to be able to get more frequent interactions with it. So hopefully that is going to fix the issue that I've been having of not being able to get a good next encounter. So that is what is happening there. We've got 2 crews training for Apollo missions. We've got one coming up in 18 days, one in 42. We have the next Apollo spacecraft that is going to be heading lunar in 119 days, and that is using the brand new version of the is actually using the 10-meter version of the Paladin 4 spacecraft. So that should be good. We're able to train our mission crews a lot faster than we're able to actually build these rockets. However, 63,000 funds is not going to be enough to roll this thing out to the pad, I'm pretty sure. All right, I think the last thing that I can do is take a wild bet on being able to orbit Mercury within the next 5 years, which, I mean, sounds doable. Like, I mean, there's nothing that sounds that's like impossible, but hopefully it's something that we're going to be able to do with the Hermes-1. However, there's no guarantee, and I didn't want to risk the failure, but we are now out of money just about, so boop, there we go. Now we have the funds we need to earn the rest of the money that we're going to be getting from our upcoming contract. So yeah, that's all there is to that. So let's roll forward a little bit. I would love to have another mission rolling out, but they're just so damn expensive. All right, so here we are with the Hermes-1. We are just a couple days out from our maneuver node. And what I'm trying to do at this point is I am burning near the ascending node and also near our perihelion, with the idea that I want to bring down our aphelion. So you can see that this orbit is a little bit little hard to see, but we go up above Venus's orbit here, and that's not actually helpful in any way. So I'm able to get a lot of results and kind of scan forward into the future using maneuver nodes, looking at what this orbit is going to bring me, but I wasn't able to figure out how to see what this new lower orbit is going to bring me, because that's going to change the math a little bit, because it's going to reduce the length of my, solar year a little bit on every single orbit, and that obviously, as we go further and further out, that's going to become a bigger and bigger difference. So that is the plan here. Let's see, we are 4 days out, so we can get a little bit closer before I make this maneuver. But yeah, so I think that we are actually going to try to save a little bit of money. I have that 400,000 funds because I don't have any big mission ideas yet that don't involve stuff that we've already, launched. So I'd really like to get moving on our the work with Lunette space station first before we move on, and then we will kind of look at the new technology that we're unlocking. So it's not such a bad idea for us to just actually do some time warping ahead to do some unlocking of stuff, because we have some really cool stuff, like early nuclear propulsion is coming up. I just unlocked multi-100-watt RTGs, improved capsules, which is going to dramatically reduce the cost of our Apollo program, and then early space stations, and then basic life support, and these things here are going to make space station building a lot easier and cheaper, and allow us to go a lot further with crewed missions. Space station attitude control, uncrewed landing, and then we have a lot of engine upgrades that we're going to be working on, and that is going to bring our ability to launch all sorts of things up in a pretty dramatic fashion, and it is also going to allow us to build better long-range spacecraft. Then we're going to go into a phase of unlocking blue sky nodes of spaceplane era stuff, exploration era science, avionics, and then we're going to kind of go back down to where we are at this point in the list, where we are unlocking new RTG nodes, nuclear propulsion, ISRU, control, and then another round of rocketry. So yeah, we have kind of a lot that we are doing, but it's all in sequence, and we are unlocking things at a really rapid pace. It's just that I haven't been doing much time warping. It is 1976. We're partway through the year, but yeah, there's a lot that we're going to be getting done, even in the time that it takes us to build this Apollo 3 rocket. 100 days, which means we're going to get just about 3 of these. We're going to have a whole bunch of new tech, and then that's going to allow us to do a bunch more stuff. So yeah, by the time I finish this one mission and finally have some money, we're going to have 4 more tech nodes unlocked, and I'll be able to hopefully build some more interesting stuff. So that is kind of my thinking on that. But yeah, so now we are just under 3 hours away from this node, so I think it's time for us to move around to actually make it happen. We can close that maneuver node alarm clock. And the Hermes spacecraft, as I've mentioned, it's just an excellent thing that is just a small science bus, and we're going to be seeing a lot of this sort of thing going into the future. The big trick is that we're going to have a whole lot of upgrades that is going to be coming, so I'm going to have to be like throwing some of this stuff out and making new stuff, because we're going to have a lot of new science and so forth not too long in the future. Fingers crossed about that, but I guess we'll see where things end up, because we just have so many missions that are happening right now that it's hard to like make big long range plans, because I've got like basically all my contracts are not fulfilled, but they're like in progress, I suppose. So fingers crossed that we'll actually be able to do them. But that means that like I've got all my missions kind of covered, and I'm just waiting for I'm waiting for things to happen. So it's been a very busy time up until now, where I'm just launching things nonstop and frantically doing things. And every time transfer windows come around, it's always like that. But yeah, I think that we're going to be fine just doing a little bit of time warping ahead to make some progress. Because yeah, we are winding our way down-ish. like there's fewer and fewer major objectives that we have, and the objectives that we have are getting to be bigger and bigger and more complicated. So it's not that there's not a ton to do, because there's absolutely a lot that we can still do, but our critical path towards a temporary habitation of Mars is that path is narrowing, and we are moving on along it. Okay, so there we go. I have reduced our aphelion, and we are now in an orbit that I can hopefully find out when the heck we are going to be having good encounters. And we should be having more encounters because now we are actually, touching this orbit this entire time. And so we can have encounters all along here with the descending node directly in the center of the place where we are touching. So ideally, that is going to give us a lot of good options. All right, so kind of realizing that I've messed up a bit, but that's, fine. This has all been an educational experience anyways. But so what my plan is at this point is if we focus on Venus out here, what I've done has gotten us into I did say Venus, right? There we go. I have gotten us into a place that is actually worse to make this encounter, but it does happen a good 100 or so days earlier, I guess, which is something, but I'm basically going to need to spend the same amount of delta V again to get back into this orbit that is just slightly above. So that is my fault on that one, but just my misunderstanding of where the encounter was going to end up, and how to set up those orbital mechanics to make that happen. I'm fairly certain that at least some of you have tried to tell me the right way to do this in the comments, or on Discord, but I have not listened or I have not understood. But anyways, what I'm going to do now is we are going to, in 928 days, we are going to adjust our trajectory up a bit. We are going to accelerate so that we can go up a little bit, slow down just slightly relative to Venus so that we can hit its orbit. And then we are going to go into that orbit and we are going to accelerate at the our parasite, and we are going to use that to do two things. First, we are going to fling ourselves even closer to Mercury. So this is going to be definitely not free, but it's going to be a significant amount more delta V than we are going to gain more delta V doing this than we would have if we just burned the engine ourselves. But we are going to burn the engine ourselves at our paraselene so that we can, parasite, so that we can change our trajectory even further. So what this is going to do is this is going to get us into an orbit that actually intersects sort of with Mercury's orbit. So if we set that as target, you can see that it's not quite right, and the inclination, now that you can tell through the laser light show, the inclination is not quite right, but then again, the inclination was never going to be quite right between Venus and Mercury. But this throws us into a place that's actually pretty close to the inclination of Mercury, which is helpful for our purposes. So we'll be able to do that, and it also intersects a little bit as far as how close this orbit touches at this lowest point. So you see this lowest point, this closest approach area, it's actually really close to the orbit of Mercury, and that is going to be something that I can work with to try to make that encounter. I don't know if I'm going to have enough delta V once we get that finished, but this is pretty low. This looks like a pretty standard transfer orbit between if I was going from Venus to Mercury. And so fingers crossed that that's going to be enough, but I have a suspicion that it is not. But we shall see. I have had a lot of trouble actually planning this out because I'm not using the flyby/rendezvous planners, but this is what I've been able to do with the limited tools that I have in game. If there's I don't know if there's a better tutorial or something out there that would help me understand this a little bit better, but that is a problem that I've just been having pretty much nonstop. So I am gonna set a timer 24 hours ahead of this node, and then that is when we are going to deal with it. So this is going to eat up about half of the time that it takes that we have for the contract to orbit Mercury. Fingers crossed that this is actually going to work as far as getting into orbit, but I have the strong suspicion that it will not. But by that time, we should have much better rocketry and be able to launch another mission to lap this one. So yeah, we shall see. I'm not going to say that this has been successful or anything, but it has at least been interesting and educational as far as the orbital mechanics and orbital dynamics that I'm trying to manage. So there we go. That is it for Hermes 1. All right, a little bit more technology has cruised on by, and we have unlocked, we've got the multi-100-watt RTG, which I'm going to save because, as you can see, we're just losing money just operating at this point. So we've got that, and that is going to give us a single RTG that is worth 0.158 electric charge per second, which is just fabulous. We have also unlocked early nuclear propulsion, which I am really quite excited about because this tier, as opposed to the prototype tier, is the first ones that actually start to be worth anything. Even then, these ones are still not like super great depending on the type of stage that you're launching, because you see that their minimum weight is about 9.18 tons, which is just huge for an engine. And this one only gets 4 ignitions, and it has a specific impulse of 828, which, I mean, is lovely. That's good, but it's also not so amazing compared to the fact that it weighs 9 tons that it's going to completely change our space program quite yet. But as you can see, these are getting significantly better. We're looking at the mid to upper 900s as far as specific impulse, which is what we had before, but the weight is starting to come down and the thrust is starting to come up. It's when we get to like basic nuclear propulsion that we really start to think about It's when we get to basic nuclear propulsion that I really start to think about using this stuff on large vessels, because these have similar specific impulse to the previous ones and also similar mass, but the thrust, once again, is getting better and better. The Nerva 1 is an interesting one because it has 1 electric charge per second, and it also has 60 ignitions. It's got a pretty decent thrust, still pretty heavy, still over 10 tons, but this seems like something that could be used as well, just like it says here, for orbital tugs and large rocket upper stages. So that those things combined makes this an interesting candidate for deep space work, and we are definitely on the lookout for exactly that sort of thing. The Phoebus 2A is significantly heavier, but also has some very significant thrust on it. Like very, very significant. Like that's actually really good for the amount of for a nuclear thermal stage. Only 8 ignitions, and it, yeah, like I said, it weighs a huge amount, but that should make it an interesting alternate for my upper stages that are leaving for other planets, right? Like, I would be able to put up a stage, a really big, heavy nuclear stage that was able to push out 6 or 7 or 8,000 meters per second at delta V with this. And that would be a really good use of this sort of engine. The one that I've actually got my eye on, because I'm always on the lookout for small motors, is the 2.2 ton PV100, which is got fairly decent thrust, even though it is very heavy for an upper stage type engine. But yeah, it has a specific impulse of nearly 1,000, and it only weighs 2 tons. So that is the first thing that I can think of as a really solid upper stage that I could use for a lot of different things. So this next node is pretty interesting as far as nuclear thermal propulsion. So yeah, that's something that I'm very interested in using going forward, but we'll see what we end up being able to do with that. I have also unlocked improved capsules. So we have a bit of a initial unlock cost, but this is going to get us the Apollo Block 3 Plus command module, the Apollo Block 3 Plus mission module, and some extra connectors and things for that, and also the Big G crew module, which has a crew capacity of 7, and it bolts to the bottom of the Gemini capsule, and also some extra supporting modules for that, including the Big Gemini service module, which is just a monster of a tank that is was intended to be used for the Big Gemini concept. So this is the service module that you would attach to the Big G crew module and send an entire space station on the way to the moon each time that you wanted to send one out. So that's something that's very interesting. But the I'm not sure how much use I'll get out of that, but I guess we'll see. I'll play with both, and maybe I'll launch one just to kind of play with it for a minute. But I'm very, very interested in the Apollo Block 3 stuff, because you see the Apollo Block 3 Plus command module costs 13,500 funds. And you can compare that to the regular Apollo command module, which costs 32. So that's like 20,000 funds straight off the top, plus all of the crude... what do you call it? The crude multipliers. I think there is one for costs. Human rated equipment times 1.25, that sort of thing. Re-entry equipment times 1.5. So that is why my darn Paladin Apollo launchers are so freaking expensive. Is because these, like, every bit of cost that gets multiplied this much is a big problem, and it really comes through, especially when it's being multiplied quite that much. But this is what I can use going forward for all of my Apollo needs, and I have now unlocked it. It's just a matter of actually paying the research cost to use those capsules. And that is what I'm going to be using going forward, because this is fantastic, and there's no reason for me to use the regular Apollo when I have a 5 crew capacity Apollo capsule that comes with a big mission module that is just shiny and wonderful as well. So that is unlocked. That is what we have going forward. We also have some Block 4, Block 5 equipment that is going to be coming in the future, and I'll probably end up sending this Block 4 thing on the way to Mars, because that is the last thing as far as capsules that we are going to get until way in the future in the experimental. What year would this be, I wonder? In the near future tech is when we would get to the Starliner, the Boeing Starliner, Orion, and no Dragon. Okay, no Dragon. But we do have Starliner and Orion modules here, which is just fabulous. And so if we get this far in the tech tree, then we could play with that, but I'm not holding my breath. It has taken us forever to get to this point, for goodness sake. So, yeah, that's where we are as far as technology is concerned, and that is what we have to look forward to, and that's kind of how we've spent our time waiting for the Apollo 3 craft to be prepared to launch. So, we have crew that are ready. We have... enough money to roll this out to the pad. We've got technology finishing up. Looks like early space stations is going to finish while we are underway with the Apollo spacecraft rolling out to the pad. And I'm pretty sure, yeah, that's right, this is against 2,400 tons. So this thing is going out to Super Launch Complex 1. Wrap up this last bit of technology. We got early space stations, which just gets us the Skylab, and then some other large parts, which are exciting-ish, I guess. Those are things that we will be playing with more in the future. But that is going to do it for this episode. I have already managed to mess up one orbit with my Hermes 1 that is now going into probably a worse place than it was before. Let me know down in the comments below what I should have done with that, because it's honestly something that I'm not as good with. So a little bit of expertise from you all would be much appreciated. But we are moving on forward with all kinds of other stuff, and I am really excited to see what we can do with Lunette Station. If you enjoyed this episode, please let me know what you think down in the comments below, like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.